A slow zoom in effect is a great way to add a little bit of drama to your live streams. And it's very easy to do this in an edited video in post. But what if you could do this live during your live streams? Well, in this video, I'm going to show you how to get this effect in the ATEM Mini. Hi, I'm Aaron Parecki. To follow along with this tutorial, you'll need an ATEM Mini, and you'll need to make sure that you're running the latest version of the ATEM firmware. This will work with every model of the ATEM Mini, including the ATEM Mini Extreme, the ATEM Constellation switchers, and the new ATEM Television Studio HD8. First, I'll show you how to create this effect in the ATEM, and then I'll show you how to easily trigger it with the press of a button. I do want to mention that this technique is very similar to my previous video about making a punch-in effect. There is one big difference though, which is that we're going to animate the punch-in to turn it into a slow transition. Before we can get started, you'll first need to download the ATEM software control app to your Mac or Windows computer. This app is made by Blackmagic and it lets you control everything in the ATEM. So go to the Blackmagic website, click on support at the top, scroll down, click on ATEM live production switchers, and then scroll down even farther till you find the most recent version of the ATEM switchers update. Once that's installed, go ahead and launch the ATEM software control app, and it should find your ATEM on the network or plugged in over USB. There's a feature in the ATEM Mini called the Upstream Key. This actually lets you do a bunch of different things, including making a picture-in-picture effect and also green screening. But what we're going to do is use the Upstream Key to make a picture-in-picture effect, but instead of making the picture smaller, we're going to make it larger. And then we're going to slowly animate it to be large. So to set this up, first press the on-air button under this next transition setting. This way the Upstream Key is on and you'll be able to see the changes that you're making. These here are the buttons for the Upstream keyers. Now on the ATEM Mini, you only have one Upstream key, but on other ATEMs, you might have more. So turn this on so that you can see what you're doing on the screen. So what we're gonna do is first set the Upstream key to the end position you want, then create a macro to animate from the regular position to the zoomed in position. So first open up this panel on the right, Upstream Key 1, to show all the Upstream Key settings. Go over to the DVE tab, which is where we're gonna set all this up. The DVE effect lets you scale and crop a video on top of another video. Let's go through the settings here. First, choose camera 1 for the fill source or whichever camera you want to do the slow zoom in effect with. This is the fill source. That's what the effect will be applied to. Make sure your mask, shadow, and border settings are all turned off. But the magic here is the size feature. Now, if you wanted the picture-in-picture effect, you would choose a size like 0.25, and that would make it a quarter of the screen. If you enter 1, it'll make it the full size of the screen. So to make the zoom in effect, we're gonna make this bigger than 1. Let's start by entering 1.2, and so that'll be 20% bigger. So if we pop over to the multi-view of the ATEM that I'm configuring, now when I turn this on and off, you'll see that it jumps in about 20%. Now for the position, 0, 0 is the center, which may or may not be what you want. If you want to zoom into a different center point, like if your subject is off center, you can change the X and the Y positions here. So back in the multi-view here, I'm going to change these settings until it looks about right. Ideally, I want my eyes to be in the same vertical height in the frame. So you can see that jumping in with centering the picture is a little bit wrong. We're going to have to move the Y position down a little bit. So let's scoot this down just a little bit, down about 0.5. And now we can compare when I jump in and out, it looks like my eyes are staying in the same eye line. It's handy to be able to turn on and off the Upstream Key while you're doing this to make sure that it's in the right position. So now the magic. Right now, the Upstream Key is set to the final position of the zoom in effect, but now we need to animate it. And it turns out there is a feature in the ATEM Mini that does exactly this. And it is the keyframe section in the software control. When I've got my Upstream Key in the end position that I want, I'm gonna go ahead and go down here and click the Set A button. This is going to record the current position in the A keyframe. With the Upstream Key turned on, I'm gonna click Run to Full and you'll see it slowly zoom out. And now as I click Run to A, you'll see it slowly zoom in. The duration of the effect is this rate box. 1 second is a little bit fast for that, so I'm actually gonna change that to 3 seconds. And now you can see the zoom in and zoom outs take a lot longer. So at this point you're set up, and you can use the buttons in the software control to turn on and off the Upstream Key and then run it to the different keyframes. However, I find that a little bit awkward, and there is a better way to do it a little bit more accurately and better timing. And that will be to turn all of this into a macro so that you have just one button to press and it remembers all of your settings. So next, let's create a macro to automate this effect. What this macro will do is recreate all the steps we just did earlier, set the upstream key to 100%, run the animation to the final zoomed in position. Macros are a super useful tool for automating things in your ATEM Mini. I have a couple other videos about macros, which I will also link to down below. So first, go up to the macros menu, or just press Command-Shift-M. That'll open this little palette of macros where you'll be able to create and run macros. Click on one of the empty slots and click the plus button, and that'll let you type a name for the macro. We'll say zoom in camera 1. As soon as I press record, you'll see this big red border around the whole screen, and that means anything that I touch in the ATEM software control will be recorded into this macro. That means don't change any settings except exactly what you want in the macro. One weird thing about creating a macro is that you can't really see what actions have already been recorded. And also, unless you actually change a setting, that won't be recorded either. So the first thing we need to do is basically recreate all the steps we just did to set up the upstream key before we turn it actually on. That way, it'll make sure that if you've changed the settings manually some other time, it'll always set them back to the way you have it now. So what I'm gonna do is basically touch every single setting like I just did to make sure these all get recorded into the macro, and also make sure the upstream key is not on air. So first, I'm gonna toggle this next transition until it's off air. And that actually reminds me of another slightly weird thing about recording macros. If you change the same setting more than once in a row, it'll actually only save the last value of that setting, which is actually very convenient. I can turn this on and off, and it'll just remember the off. So next, I'm gonna change from Luma back to DVE just to make sure it's setting the DVE type. I'll choose my camera source. I'll set position to 0, the Y position, the size. I'm gonna toggle on and off all the mask, shadow, and border settings. And now, just like before, I'm going to click the Set Keyframe A button. Once all of this is recorded, you're gonna actually wanna add a 1-frame pause to the macro. This basically gives the ATEM a chance to let all those settings take effect. So I'm gonna click on this Add Pause up here, type in a 1-frame pause, and now that's recorded in the macro as well. So this is queuing up all the settings for the end position. Now, the slightly weird thing is that we actually need to change the upstream key back to the defaults. That way we can run the animation to zoom to that final position. So I'm gonna go back here and just set X and Y to 0 and set the X size, X and Y to 1. Now, again, I'm gonna have to add a 1-frame pause in order to actually let these settings take effect. Next, of course, we need to choose the duration for the zoom. So I'm gonna go over here and choose 3 and press enter. And now we're actually ready to run the effect. Of course, I need to first turn it on, and then I can press run to A. And you'll see the animation happen in your multi-view. So at this point, the macro has all of the actions in it that we actually want. I'm also assuming you'll leave the video zoomed in and you will cut away manually. That probably makes sense. That way you can choose how long you want the zoomed in picture to stay on screen. So the whole sequence is done. So click on the record icon, and that will save the macro here in position 1. So now it's time to test this out to see how it looks. So switch over to the Run tab, click on Recall and Run. That way you can just tap this to run it. Make sure your upstream key is off air like you would be doing during a production, and we're gonna try this out. I'll go ahead and show you the multi-view of the ATEM here, and I'm gonna click Zoom in Camera 1, and it should run the zoom in effect for 3 seconds and then pause there. So how do you actually use this when you're live streaming? If you have the ATEM Mini Extreme, then there are buttons on the top that will let you run any of the first 8 macros saved. So if you created this in the first macro slot, then you can press the 1 button on the ATEM Mini Extreme to run it. If you have the regular ATEM Mini, then you'll need to either use the macros palette in the software control or use an external controller like a Stream Deck. And that way you can make a custom button to actually run this action. Now, to cut away from the zoomed in effect, it's gonna be slightly different than just cutting to another camera angle. Remember that this effect is using an upstream key. And that means your zoomed in image is on a layer above your regular camera switching. So as I'm switching between the active cameras here, you can see the red box is changing what camera's on air, but you just keep seeing my main zoomed in camera. So to cut away, you can either cut back to camera 1, the regular setting, or you could actually cut away to a different angle. So I'll go ahead and queue up camera 2, and as soon as I press off air, then camera 2 goes back to the program. One note about picture quality. Keep in mind that you won't want to zoom in too much because the ATEM is entirely HD. And this is scaling up an HD signal still in HD. So it's technically gonna be losing some detail once it's zoomed in. If you do this zoom in effect when you're editing an HD video, you can record in 4K, and that way when you zoom in, you still have lots of detail to work with. But since the ATEM processes everything internally in HD, you will be losing some detail when zooming in. Now, most of the time, if you're zooming in like 10 to 20%, it's not gonna be super noticeable. It will be more obvious, however, that you're losing detail if you zoom in 2x or 3x. And that's one of the reasons I like to keep it kind of subtle, around 20%. If you've managed to follow all the steps here, then congratulations, things should be working well. If you're seeing some glitches as you're using this, then chances are you don't have all of the right actions recorded in the macro. Again, you need to actually tap each setting that you want to be saved into the macro, even if it looks like you're not making changes to it. And make sure you added the pause actions in the right places, otherwise you might see a flicker while the ATEM is still in the middle of changing some of the internal Upstream Key settings. And one last thing, make sure to go up here, click on File, Save Startup State, and that'll save all the settings internally into the ATEM so you don't lose it when you reboot. If you have any questions, feel free to comment down below. I'll link to other tutorials about the ATEM Mini in the description below. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.